Hi there. We had to abruptly cut short the conversation with Ritwik in lieu of some technical glitches. My sincere apologies. The conversation, however, warrants an extension into possible futuristic scenarios. Are we going to marry AI and technology with policy decision making for governments? A machine is incorruptible, transparent, analytical, and can weigh all alternatives of a decision that might impact millions. A fail proof decision maker. As we move to an age of transparent privacy, the machine is our best bet to make data driven decisions on a planetary scale. Or is it? I am Nicola Penn, and welcome to part 2, episode 1 of The Age of Aquarius.
Right. So we lost a little bit of connection there, and we're just restarting it practically from where we left off. So, Ritwik, I now realize that you were able to hear me throughout, and we've at the end of the discussion we've mostly closed on how we got here part of it.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So what I meant to start off with was we are moving into from see decentralization of democracy and become making larger and larger democracies. We are almost at the cusp of a new beginning where we are looking at one world, one economy, one world, one government system, universal basic income and concepts like that. uh,
Yes.
let's start brushing through that and see on where we are headed from where we are right now.
Okay, so first of all, there are 2 points I wanted to raise. Uh, One being that as you were talking about the media houses and how they are now being controlled. So I was discussing. I mean, if you remember, few points back, we were discussing about how
Yes,
um, all the tools that we have in front of us, which through which we can question the government, right? I'm not talking about opposing the government. I'm not talking about going against the government, but questioning the government are being now um, disbanded or are being now being controlled by the government itself or are being disgraced by the government. So why this third part of being disgraced by the government? So if you look at judiciary or if you look at enforcement directorate, CBI, and all these kind of government bodies or the checks and balance bodies, these are now being puppets at the realm of the government. At
agreed.
the same time now, as we talk about the fourth pillar of democracy, media again is in control of the government, and so are the capitalists. The reason for that is that of course they work for profit. They work towards profit principle, and you can easily control them, right?
Yes, of
uh,
course.
Through market forces or whatever you want to call it. The only I guess the pillar of democracy or the only element of democracy that you cannot buy is the students of the country, right? If you look at whether it was JP movement or if you look at the nationalist movements at the time of our independence, a lot of them were driven by the students. And I mean, a fact check, or as one could say, a paradoxical situation that our own prime minister participated in a movement called Nav Nirman movement. Now,
Mhm.
this is in his own website, okay? And such a paradox that the entire movement started because of fee hikes in Gujarat University and in other colleges of Gujarat. So the student came out on streets opposing the fee hike, and which actually led to a much bigger movement and led to change in the entire politics of Gujarat,
You mean the fee
wherein
structures for the colleges and educational institutions?
not just the structures for the colleges, but the entire politics of Gujarat. What
Okay.
came after that, and how things went off from there, it was very different from. So the entire movement, though it started from fee hikes in college, it started with the logic of opposing the fee hikes in colleges, but it turned out to be something that changed the entire course of politics for Gujarat. And all these leaders, including Narendra Modi, they came out of this particular movement. So it's very easy to understand why they don't want students to oppose them, or they why don't want students to think or talk about these things. So now they cannot buy them off, right? It's very hard to buy students because one, they study and they can see the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
If a student of economics is reading out or studying the economic survey of India or the budget of India, he could realize what the mistakes are. We, you and me cannot, because we work and we have other stuff to do. But a student who's maybe doing MA or PhD in economics, it's his entire job is to study these things. And same goes with, let's say, a student of philosophy or political science or sociology or social psychology for that matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, as you cannot buy them off, better is to disgrace them. The better is to demean them or defame them. And if you look at the crackdowns at the universities, it's so planned, one after the other. It started from HCU, Hyderabad Central University, then they went to JNU, then they went to NIT, then they again came back to Delhi University. They went to Jadavpur University, that's in West Bengal, and then multiple other universities all across India, right? So now, because they know that, for that matter, Atal Bihari Vajpayee came out of student politics. Arun Jaitley came out of student politics. So they know the power of, students in terms of how they can oppose, because you cannot buy them off. You can buy the media, you can buy capitalists, you can buy, or you can sedate people like they always did. But for students, it's very hard. So it's better to demean them or to uh, defame them, so that the general public don't even is not even ready to listen to them. And that's what happened with JNU. I mean, if you look at it now, if you talk about JNU to somebody, they would say that the the entire university is flawed, though they have never met somebody from JNU, though they might not have ever spoken with somebody from JNU, but still they would say the entire university is flawed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why am I talking about it is that it's not just one tool that they have in democracy to keep you in your place. There are multiple tools that they have, right? Defamation is one, sedation is two, buying off is three, producing is fourth. So similarly, because this is what will shape the future of democracy, and this is what will shape what's next.
Okay.
Because until unless they have these tools intact, and people won't revolt to this, because they are okay with it. And as I said, establishing the cult, and I wanted to discuss this because it was, I mean, it was turning out to be a relevant point to the entire discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about a model, that how cults are established. So there's this model called bite model. What it does is it basically has four components, that is BITE: behavior, information, thought, and emotional control that a particular sect or a particular cult or a particular government can have over you. So when it comes to behavioral control, now you need permission to criticize the government. How can criticism, or how can speaking about anything for that matter, be on somebody else's control? This means that you're not free then, right?
Of course not.
You
Yes.
don't have, yeah. Similarly is the control over information. Now this is a very important thing, because see, one is that they blur the information so that they can distort the reality,
Hmm.
and another thing is that they control the information to only send out that part of the information which serves their purpose. So for example, what happens in Kashmir, you'll only get that news which is relevant for them, you know to propagate,
Okay.
not the entire story. So
So
they
we're
control
basically
the,
talking about pushing your own propaganda.
yeah, pushing your own propaganda by controlling the information so that
Correct.
the reality get distorted,
Mm-hmm.
because you would rely upon the information that you get, and the information again is being portrayed to you from one perspective, that is from the ruling party's perspective, as one could say, or the ruling class's perspective. Then comes controlling the thoughts. So of course, they have changed your rational thoughts to your irrational thoughts. Now you don't think about GDP, or for that matter, like, I mean, it's a great propaganda that they're spreading, that is overpopulation, and one religion, that is because of which overpopulation is there, right?
Yes.
Now this is not a rational thought. So what they have done is, rather than putting up the rational view on overpopulation, they have converted it to an irrational view, and they have created this thought, or they have established this thought in your mind of us and them, right? This is called in group and out group in sociology,
Hmm.
that we are one, and we and they are different.
Right, but see, when you're heading a people management system, and that essentially what a government is basically governance of all subjects in whatever way, shape, or form. Then isn't the whole idea of democracy being put to the gallows simply by the fact that you're crubbing crubbing outspoken individuals, or that you're stopping, or you're by means of media, or by means of what you're saying, isn't that causing the annihilation of democracy itself? So I mean, what I want to really understand is that a it is becoming increasingly apparent in our discussion that the leaders of the democracy, the outcome of democracy is its leaders, and the leaders themselves are then hell bent by every tool that that they can get their hands on to curb
Hmm.
the system with which they have come to power themselves. Is that not self depreciating? I mean, if democracy is no longer fair, and if people are losing trust in governance, in democratic systems, in election campaigns, so on and so forth, is that not killing your own future democratic ruling chances? I mean, if I don't trust the democracy any longer, why would I participate into a democracy? I mean, or is this or this is a part of a larger scheme that we are not able to understand, wherein you don't really need a democracy of any sort, and once you are in power, you want to just hold more and more power and more influence upon your subjects, and curb a lot of noise that is coming against you. And
Hmm.
if that is the case, I mean, we spoke earlier when you mentioned that the leaders of today are not really in search of power, or are not
Hmm.
really in search of money or fame or anything like that. Then what is the motivating factor to actually curb all this? I mean, if I get elected because of a system that works, and that selects me, and that I turn out leader, I would ideally want to be, and I don't have any vested interest in destroying it, then ideally I would be the one who
Okay.
would be
So
who would the greatest
for that,
advocate of that.
so for that, let's go back to the initial discussion that we had when we started with this podcast. We were talking about democracy being an alternative, nothing else,
Uh-huh.
right? So I would like to change that statement, or I would like to modify that statement, saying that actually democracy was not an alternative. Democracy was just a tool to inculcate or to implement those ideas that came out of a revolution. So the ideas that came out of a revolution were liberty, equality, fraternity,
Yes,
right?
freedom of any way, shape, or form.
Freedom. So you need to implement that. What's the best way, or what's the best tool in front of you? Democracy, right?
Okay.
But just like just like any other tool, a knife can be used to cut and make food, right? But it can also be used for a murder,
Correct.
as a murder weapon.
Yes.
Similarly, the democracy, rather than looking at it, as a political system, and giving it a grandeur kind of a perspective, it would be better for us to understand it just as a political tool to implement what your ideas are. If your ideas are liberty, equality, fraternity, you'll be able to implement those.
Mm-hmm.
If your ideas are hatred, and if your ideas are, this subliminal uh, suppression of your masses, then you'll be able to do that. So it's actually the people who needs to understand that why what uh, what is the purpose of this government and what is it using it for? This particular tool, how are they using it for? What purpose are they using it for? And going back to uh, the model of cult. So the last, as I was talking about, it is emotions. Okay,
Okay.
controlling emotions. Now that is the most important aspect. You can control somebody's behavior, you can control somebody's information, you can control somebody's thoughts. Even corporate does that. But when you can control somebody's emotions, right, then you can give them a particular direction according to what you want, right? And obviously it's very easy to mobilize somebody who's already polarized,
Of course.
isn't it? So so looking at this, what we need to find next, or the alternative that we need to find, is a tool, not a system per se. Democracy is just a tool, right?
Hmm.
We can replace that tool, and it has always been like, after 100 years, or maybe 200 years or 400 years for that matter, uh, people have found new ways of aligning themselves politically. So democracy has a very short history in that comparison. I believe you agree with that.
Yes, of course.
We have already, right? So uh, moving further, I mean, if you have anything to add, we can. Otherwise, moving forward,
No, I do agree. I mean,
what's
so
next?
we're talking about bite, and if I remember this correctly, this is be influence of behavior, information, thoughts, and emotion, which then
Yes,
practically gives you complete control over an individual. And if you're doing
yes.
this on a mass scale,
Hmm.
then this will give you a more or less direct control over how the populace is behaving, and one of the outcomes of which is going to be polarization in whatever way, shape, or form. Now, once you have a set of polarization, then are you officially a cult when people are polarized?
Uh, See, not necessary. That's what. So I was understanding how cults work, and I was researching about it, looking at a lot of theories and text. So I realized, and it's just like from my perspective, that even corporates have cults, right? So Apple, for a fact, is an organization which has created its own cult. If
Hmm.
you're using an iPhone, it's very hard for you to switch back to any other device. Now, the reason is they have created their own ecosystem. They control your behavior, information, thought, and emotions. You have attached all these four things to that particular device or that particular organization or the company,
Correct.
right? That technology. But the thing is, that is more of a positive cult because they're not doing anything unethical. Why they have become a cult is because they're providing you kind of the best thing possible, right? And they are into an infinite game wherein they are not. I mean, Simon Sinek says that he is again a business strategist, a life strategist. He talks about how Apple is a cult. So Apple is a cult because they are playing an infinite game. They are not talking about they're not competing with anybody, right? So Apple, so for example, Samsung brings out a new product, and then any other I mean Motorola, or maybe Nokia, or any other technology firm, they would bring similar kind of a product. Apple has its own league. They actually bring in new technology,
Hmm.
isn't it?
Yes.
They are playing an infinite game wherein they are fighting with themselves, or they are competing with themselves rather than competing with others. So that is a positive cult. But looking at this cult, and why this is a cult is because it's not just political, right? This is social as well now, and this is something wherein there are media people, there are political people, there are gurus that are involved with these guys. There are people from arts background, right? Wherein you could say that there are singers who are involved, there are poets who are involved, there are actors who are involved, and this was similar was the case at the time of Hitler as well. Hitler used to produce or used to propagate movies which used to show Nazis in a better light,
Right.
and that inculcate that false nationalism, as I call it, a hawk's nationalism. So again, coming to the perspective that uh, you know, the entire purpose of a cult is to give you, to keep you where you are and not make you think, to control you so much so that they know where you are and what you're doing, so that they can. It's not just about polarization, it's more of about, you know, people thinking from your angle, nothing else, right?
Right. And so that people are behaving, thinking, and emotionally responding uh,
Hmm.
exactly the way that you intend them to be, so that you can suit your own needs and purpose.
So you kill their thinking. Sorry, so you kill their thinking so much that they now, uh, it's not like they can't question you, it's like they don't want to question you.
Correct. They wouldn't want to stand it. Is fear also a major factor here? I mean, because
Fear.
I know that I know that there are. Uh, I know somebody in power who's amazingly efficient and this and that. At least his perception is that he's always right and he's doing things for the greater good and propaganda stuff like that. And even if
Hmm.
I do not believe something entirely that he's saying, but I would still refrain, because I know that a lot of people in my circle, even as little as my friends, families, and colleagues, uh, will be completely opposed to me if I do voice out my true opinion. So that is also a form of crubbing my own perception formation, is it not?
Okay, so first of all behaviors are driven by adaptation.
Hmm.
So you need to adapt, or you need to be adaptive to your environment, and hence you behave in a certain way.
Exactly.
You react to certain things and you don't react to certain
Hmm.
things, right? So one is social conformity, wherein you need to conform with whatever is established in the society, right? Another thing is that if you talk about fear as a tool, so fear, it depends on which side of, the perspective you are. Are you opposing it, or are you with it? In terms of, like, for example, let's say the entire propaganda is against one religion, so people who are from that religion might have that fear. But people who are, let's say, lynching, or people um, who are opposing, right, the other religion, is actually getting empowered. So again, bringing it from a talking from a psychological perspective, what happens is, see, as human beings, we are very tiny. Our entire existence is very tiny.
Hmm.
So if I talk, like, if somebody asks me, Ritwik, who are you? And if I say I am Ritwik, so Ritwik in himself is a very tiny creature who may have no existence whatsoever, right? Has no particular set of thinking, no particular set of opinions, and maybe living a very ordinary normal life. So that doesn't establish my self-esteem, or that doesn't establish my self-worth. But if you ask me, Ratvik, who are you? And if I say I'm a Hindu, right, or I'm a male for that matter, now I am much bigger than who I am actually,
Right. Part of a larger community.
in my soul. Yeah. So I am now associating myself to be a Hindu, and that gives me a lot of pride.
Hmm.
That pride, which is actually not my own, but my entire community's. But it makes me a very big person in my own, head, because now I think that, uh, whatever I need to do is to, let's say, protect Hinduism, right, or to propagate Hinduism. So now I can do much bigger things, or much larger things than what I would usually do in my life. I can go off and, hammer a mosque for that matter,
Right, right,
because.
right. And I'm thinking about drawing a parallel from this into how a crowd behaves. The whole crowd behavior. I mean, as an
Hmm.
individual, I would not hit a police officer on the head. But if I am a
Hmm.
part of 100,000 crowd, then I probably will want to do that. If I am agitated enough, or if I mean, your levels of courage, your levels of adrenaline, of aggression, and into whatever act that you are a part of at that time, do get aggravated. And we see this all the time, what you're saying. If I were to take examples, you really do see and witness this all the time. For example, in cricket matches, in football matches around the world, you would
Mm-hmm.
normally not, if you're sitting in front of a television, you would normally not dance and shout the way that you do into a stadium, because you're a part of a larger crowd, and that gives you a feeling of oneness with I mean, a part of a larger community or a larger group. So I see the kind of power that it entitles me on, and why that can get addictive. And of course, if you are controlling, if you're controlling the polarization part of it, then you can definitely control how that aggression, how that elation is being channelized into whatever your agenda could be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So yes, so I
Exactly.
do see the parallels here. Uh, right. But Ritwik, so we've come this far where we've lost all forms of fair governance, so to speak. We've lost
Mm-hmm.
almost all kind of trust. We have started realizing that wait a minute, something is fishy here. This is not white and black. I mean, 90% of our lives are in the gray area somewhere, where somebody or someone is manipulating to his own interests and deeds, and people in power do want to remain in power and get more powerful over time, whether it is through money or whether it is through decision making, or by creating and bending the rules and the laws of the land. Uh, but but is that, number one, is that such a bad thing that you're being run by enlightened by people of the society who are, I mean, they are effectively controlling it. Whether for the better good of the humanity or not is another question, because an ideal human society will vary from my perception to yours, and anybody else's who's listening in on us. But number one, is that such a bad thing, to be controlled, to be polarized, to be in a elated sense of being and being a part of a larger community? And number two, what where do you see all of this going? I mean, where is this all leading us? We've come so far, we've grown bigger, better, we've got we've got tools more powerful than we've never ever had before. I mean, if you remember, the last world war was fought basically with the computing power of your modern day calculator. And if if we are getting, if we are on the brink of another one, or of any kind of heightened agitation which is taking place, where do you see all this moving? Are we moving into a different kind of government system? Is the long overdue revolution coming, or is this going to be an intellectual battle, of a battle behind the curtains, like the Cold War? What do you see coming out of this here? And what as a society, as a civilization, what kind of options do we have available?
Okay. So, first of all, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are. A little louder would help, but I think that's just me hearing you overview, IP.
Great. So, first of all, see, if you ask me that what is the current thing in terms of this, so I believe we still haven't reached the epitome of democracy.
Mm-hmm.
We still haven't reached the highest level of what it's meant to be before collapsing, because still there are people opposing, still there are people who are standing up to it, right? Now if I talk about, like, I have few cousins who are could say, you could say, the next generation of me, who are 10 years younger than me, and if I see them at that age also, they are constantly over their phones. They are being influenced by whatever they see just on those devices, right? Whether it's Facebook, or whether it's WhatsApp, whether it's Instagram, etc., etc. They have nothing to do with analyzing stuff. So what will happen is, once they'll reach a certain stage and they need to go to college and they need to study and for higher education, their parents, because of what is going on right now, their parents might not even ask them to, or might not even let them to go to colleges like JNU and DU, because you are being like, these colleges are being defamed so much,
Right.
right? So, and this has happened even in these past 6 months, 6 years. The number of applications to these colleges have reduced drastically. So what you're doing is you're killing the entire instinct of asking questions, the entire instinct of going against the current establishment. So these things are, whether they are students, whether it's the college systems, whether it's media, these are called, there's a word to it, it's called anti-establishments.
Yes, and
These are meant to be
hmm
anti-establishments, right? So when they say that, why this particular reporter is always against, the government is always against the ruling party, it's because he is meant to be. That's what his job is, to question. If he would not question, then who will, right? So similarly, if you're killing this instinct, this would show up in the next generations to come, wherein at least we still have few people who are questioning. And if you talk, like you spoke about, why is this relevant, why to question and why not just follow? Because I mean, as Bhagat Singh rightly said, that following somebody with closed eyes is again a kind of dependency, right? It's not freedom.
yes,
And and again, second point, why? Because history has always taught us that, I mean, if you look at Jews and what happened to them, right? Similarly, if you ask the perspective of a Muslim right now in India, that or a Dalit right now in India, as to what is going on, do you feel it is right? Why can't you just accept and be okay with it? Of course, you'll get the answer. Why is it relevant to question?
hmm
uh, for that matter, it doesn't, for them it doesn't matter whether they are a Muslim or not, right? They, so with all these ideologies in place, they want you to have these ideologies. They themselves might not have these ideologies. Getting my point?
yes, yes,
So they themselves know what is right and what is wrong. It's just that for you to be polarized, they are giving you that information to process in a certain fashion. So if you look at I mean, right now, if you even look at poor and the class which is lower than BPL, everything is a hoax. They started with a yojana called Jan Dhan Yojana. Now they literally, I mean, in one district they open 30,000 account with 1 rupee. Now you, like, the people don't have that financial literacy. What will they do with that particular account?
exactly.
And you're putting 1 rupee into that account doesn't serve any purpose.
Yeah,
So similarly, these are the dangers why we need to question, because it's not just what the politics of it or the society of it. Even your economy is going down. The entire growth that you see right now, this, for a fact, like, if anybody could just sit for an hour and analyze the numbers, if somebody is good with management, would realize that, okay, things are wrong, things are things are going haywire. So similarly, this becomes very, very important for us to question, because when you question something, when you question anything, either you get a clarity or you get what is wrong.
right. Okay, and yeah, so you're right. So if I am a part of a polarized sect, so to speak, if I have, it is good for me and the people around me because we obviously feel enlightened. We feel a part of a larger community. We have higher levels of existence in terms of energy levels, in terms of aggression, adrenaline, so on and so forth. But then if and when and as we have seen almost always in the past, that as and when that has been directed to certain sections of the society, within the society, it is eventually a loss of trust, a loss of a loss of human life, a loss of basically leading to some or the other form of societal imbalances, which then have larger repercussions.
Yep. Yep. Now, if I talk about what's next, see, first we need to reach the epitome of democracy. First, you need to reach the epitome of democracy in terms of that you are now not a thinking body. You don't think now. You just act. You act according to what has been told to you. Once you are 100% a puppet in the hands of the government, that's when the democracy will reach its epitome. And I guess that's when, things would, you would need a different model.
Wait, so you think, but how will that come about if everybody is a puppet? And
Hmm.
I'm assuming you mean 100% of the population is a puppet, or is it complete control? So to put it bluntly, 100% population and 100% control lies with the government. Then how? Where is this
If you
change
look,
coming from?
see, if you look right now, in India or globally, for that matter, even in the US or in the UK, right? You just need one. Okay, so uh, in India, if I talk about, I believe that approximately 65% of the population must be polarized right now, isn't it? More than 65%, I believe.
Yeah, I mean,
Obviously, I
to
don't have
some degree, of course.
data. I'm just speculating that they, like, people are polarized. And when I say polarized, I mean they fear asking questions.
Mhm.
They, it's not just they fear asking questions; they don't want to ask questions.
Yes, they would rather
They are
not ask
okay with,
questions.
yeah, right, because they cannot confront the fact that now they are slaves,
All
isn't
right,
it?
of course not. Yes, nobody would want to believe that.
Mm. But see, if you ask me, again, it's a topic in itself for a different discussion. But if you ask me what's next in democracy, I believe, the only point that I can think of, or the only way that I can think of is, again, it's very controversial, but have you heard of epistocracy or neocracy?
Yes, I think we briefly touched upon it over a chat that we were having a few weeks ago. But I would want you to
Right.
explain for the larger audience as well.
So, epistocracy is a form of governance, or epistocracy is a form or a tool, as we are discussing, is a tool of governance, wherein the government is being run by the experts. So the finance ministry is not being run by anybody but a scientist. Sorry, but a financial advisor, or an economist.
Yeah.
And the Ministry of Science and Technology is being run by a scientist.
Okay.
So you have,
Subject matter
like
experts
Akbar used to
running
have
their
a,
own systems, right?
yes, like Akbar used to have a Navratna,
Mm-hmm.
wherein everybody is an expert in their own fields, including Birbal, who was an expert, in any and everything, and including Tansin, who was an expert in music. Similarly, you have an entire court in front of you, which is an expert in their own fields, and you get them by merit. And this is already there. So, for example, now they are trying to disrupt it, but in major uh, uh, it, what do you call it, in major sects of governance, for example in army, right, in Indian Army or Defense Forces, the person who is the oldest and has the highest position becomes the general,
Right.
right, who is most likely to retire next
Mm-hmm.
will become the general.
Mm-hmm.
Then even with judiciary, the most experienced one who has the most experience will become the CGI.
Yes.
Now they're trying to disrupt it. They are bringing in their people, avoiding this basic norm that have been established in these particular areas. But I mean, looking at it from that perspective and taking examples from these judiciary or defense forces, you could see that you can kind of bring in a similar kind of setup, wherein the most experienced person or the most qualified person, or in terms of merit, you can bring in people who can actually give you the right direction towards things. There are 100 flaws to this process. There are a lot of flaws to this process, especially the flaw being that, of course, these guys can also be driven by one ideology,
Yes.
but at least you'll have some kind of meritocracy.
That's interesting. That's interesting to understand, and that is how a logical society would want to function. And only to push your idea a little further, if you really do have subject matter experts running their own fields of knowledge in their own little spheres and doing their own wizardry into things that they know and only they can do best, then why
Hmm.
have a I mean, we have advanced technology, we have artificial intelligence, machine learning. Why do you need a human at the helm any which ways? So the ask from the society is that you need a good decision maker who cannot be corrupted, who is always right, who who runs most efficient systems in the shortest time span, and who takes into account all permutations and combinations and of all the consequences that may arise, and must be able to communicate efficiently with such leaders in their own little spheres. I mean, so the human resource leader will be talking to the technology leader, will be talking to the minister of industries, so on and so forth. If
Hmm.
we are really pushing for the idea for that, I mean, why not have a system software, an artificial entity run the show for us? Because all of these checkboxes that are the core requirements for that job can never be done better by any human in whatever way, shape, or form, or whatever talent, than by an actual automated system. And you cannot simply corrupt it. And whatever you find wrong with it, if we can have a feedback mechanism, and then you can just get a HRD software version 1.2 or something like that. What is going to stop us from going there? If we are really to have a world economy of any sort, or if we are really to have a one world, one government, why does it have to be a human? Why can it not be uh, uh, any form of artificial intelligence, or a computing program to take those decisions for us?
Okay, there are two reasons to it. Uh, there's a book called Deep Work by I'm forgetting the name of the author. I believe it's Carl Newport. Uh, so Deep
Hmm.
Works talk about artificial intelligence, and it talks about what it can and it cannot do. So what it says is that in coming next 15 to 20 years, anything or any job that requires multitasking
Hmm.
can be replaced by AI.
Of course.
If
Agreed.
like if in our jobs we are able to multitask, then it can be done by artificial intelligence. But governance is something wherein you need to take a lot of things into factor. First is the that there are humans involved. So you need to take human behavior or human psychology into context, into consideration. You need to
Okay.
look at which policy is best. So a policy can be right logically, but it cannot be right for people per se at that particular point in time, at that particular situation. So you need an expert who has that kind of an experience, that he knows what will suit the best at particular situation, not the logical but the most suitable. Second is what AI cannot do is AI cannot create something new. It can function. It can, when I say create, I mean you need human intervention or you need human brain to factor in all those things and be creative into something. AI cannot help you in that. So I have a software through which I can make a poster, right?
Okay.
But I will be the one being creative with it. Now I can be X creative, you can be Z creative, or somebody can be A creative, right? Now creativity is something that cannot be mapped, that cannot be logically explained. Again, cannot be reasoned with.
Hmm.
So sometimes you need creative solutions to problems because, see, for example, even environmental issues. So logically speaking, there can be XYZ environmental issues and environmental solutions, as we could call it, but you cannot implement them because of so and so reasons, because of economy or because of uh, people not wanting it, or because people cannot follow it, etc., etc. So you need to again factor in that particular aspect, that what the masses actually want. When I say masses, I mean what what is most suitable at this particular time. Not logical, but suitable.
But yeah, okay, I see the point, but don't you think that since we've got a lot of surveillance going on, I mean, if there are enough systems in place to listen in, to collect data about each individual's behavior in whatever way, shape, or form, right from my shopping habits to my spending habits to my behavioral habits, and we don't know after coronavirus when you start thermal screening and checks like that. I mean, how far is the day that you can, while you are scanning my body for at the airport for any metal objects, you can also scan my vitals like my blood pressure, etc., to understand and the outcome of emotions out of it. So every emotion, from my understanding, has effect on vitals. If I'm angry, or if I am aroused, or if I am saddened, or if I'm just tired, I will it will change and create the ripple down changes into my vitals. So I don't see a day to that's too far away, when while you're checking my luggage and you're scanning me for metal objects, you are also at the same point in time understanding whether I'm in angry, or whether I'm determined, or whether I'm happy, sad, or whatever it is. Now once you have that kind of and that level of individual data collection in place worldwide, uh,
Hmm.
analyzing that data in a systematical way to take data driven decisions, and this is already happening in a lot of the corporate world. A lot of decision making has turned to analytics and dashboards, and especially target driven tasks, which are being almost completely driven by data, and all decision making is mostly being data driven. Why can that not be replicated, if an AI, or if a computer system, to simplify it, is advanced enough? Okay, maybe not now, maybe not in 10 years or 15 years, or if it advanced enough at some point of time in the future, why do you think humans will not want to trust it? I mean, it is completely incorruptible. It doesn't have its own hidden agenda, because somebody created it from scratch. So we know that the software and the source code is completely open for us to exploit and to understand how that was created. uh, I,
So
I I
agree.
don't really see the I don't really see the hesitation from a frustrated 100% controlled human civilization to turn to machines, and to turn to AI for all its essential societal decision making.
Okay, so you could consider this option, or you could say that this option of using AI is or will be the epitome of democracy. Because, see, we talked about the sedatives, and we talked about the drugs, and we talked about
Hmm.
dopamine.
Hmm.
So, this is what it is, right? This data collection, and then presenting you with things which suits your pleasure principle and increases dopamine in your body is actually the way they are controlling you, even right now. They are
Yes,
collecting that data not to better suit your realities, but to distort you from realities.
of course.
They are technically using it as a drug. We already discussed about it.
Hmm.
Similarly, so this would be the epitome of it. So as you know, this phrase goes on that if you can give all your data to Google or Facebook, why can't you give it to the government, right?
Yes, of
So
course.
yeah, so the highest level of, I believe, the highest level of democracy would be when you are being driven by data, and you are being driven by this AI, and
Okay.
then you would need experts to actually guide you, because through this process, now AI or the government or any system that you're using knows much more than you do about yourself.
Yes.
Like for example, I also, if somebody asks me, okay, list down your habits, or list down your preferences when you open, let's say, what all you Google, or what all you search about, or what are your hobbies, I might not be able to mention it, but a date I mean but artificial intelligence system might be
Of
able to tell
course.
me much better. My mobile will much be able to tell me what all I search and what all I'm interested in. So technically they know much more about you than yourself, so they can actually control you well. That control is, as we discussed before, would lead them to polarize you and do, xyz things that we already discussed. So this becomes the epitome of democracy, and then you need a system of, like, as I said, I'm just speculating, or I'm just, saying this as an alternative, that epistocracy can be, an alternative to democracy, because there you have experts. These experts come from merit, and these experts know what to do and when to do it, and what's best suited for the society, and what's best suited for the country or nation, or whatever you want to call it. So,
Right.
the logic being that, a time would come, like for example, in the US right now, a husband might not share his social security number with his wife.
Hmm.
Reason being, again, the data collection is so strong there that your social security number can tell any and everything about you to the other person, and they can literally control you through that. Similarly, a time would come wherein we would start feeling that sense of insecurity and that lack of trust, and that would be the epitome of democracy. And then you would be needing a model, or you would be needing, something else to fit in.
Right.
So if you
Absolutely.
if you if you talk about AI, it again is a sedative or a drug in the hands of the government, and
Yes, and
cannot
and
be an alternative accordingly, I believe.
and yeah, and the basic, I mean, as basic human nature, we would not really want to give away decision making control to an autonomous robot. I mean, that's practically what happens in every futuristic movie where AI takes over the world, and robots come in and
Yes.
destroy us anyways.
So AI, even looking at the current scenario, I mean, I don't know why. Again, it's a topic for another discussion. But then, why we brought this concept of Aadhaar in India, despite knowing its demerits in the US and other Western
Hmm.
world countries. Um, People have already started feeling that mistrust into it, right? The entire system, wherein you don't know what's going to happen next, because they know everything about you, any and everything. So now, right now, I'm not controlling what I watch. I'm not controlling what I eat. I'm not controlling what I do. It's being controlled by somebody else.
Yeah, those are interesting. Those are interesting things that we would definitely want to ponder on. uh, where all is this headed? We still don't have a conclusive answer, and of course, that was not the intended outcome at all. We've only pointed out that yes, there is a little more fuel in the tanks of democracy to take civilization further. Things are definitely going to get worse before they get better, and the way they get better is subject matter experts basically running the show in their respective spheres, getting more data driven as as a society.
One thing that I want to add here is that, see, why democracy will sustain for a little longer is because this kind of system democracy is, it gives an option for the leaders to learn from their own mistakes. So, for example, the current regime in India has learned, I believe, I mean, I'm a strong believer in it, that they have learned two very important and essential things from one Hitler and two Indira Gandhi. So from Hitler, they learned this fact that, whatever you do should not come out in front, right? I should not say it up front.
Mhm.
My peers can say it, my juniors can say it, they can say whatever they want, right? I'll provide them shield, but I should not be the shield.
Right.
I should not be the face of it, right? Because that's what Hitler did, and that's what led to his demise. Second is Indira Gandhi. With Indira Gandhi, what she did was, a blunder that she made in her career was bringing in emergency. So it's better to bring in soft emergency, or it's better to bring in um a democracy uh, which is not by law, but a democracy which is there by norm. The difference between a law is that, it is sanctioned by government, and norm is which is social. So
Hmm.
what they have done
Hmm.
is, they have brought a norm of or they have established a norm of emergency right now. As I said, we were talking about it yesterday as well, that I cannot stand in front of a large crowd and speak these things openly. I will be fearful of it.
Yes.
I will fear it, right? Because that's the soft emergency that they have brought now. So democracy learns from it itself, and that's why it would run a little longer, because the leaders currently again are learning from mistakes of their ancestors.
Right, and making new ones as they go along, as we've seen very recently.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Uh, right.
it's
Well then, Ritwik, this was an amazing start to the podcast. We've got it into two sections.
yeah.
Thank you so much for the time, listening audiences that have been here.